When he looked me in the eyes and said those words, "Sabrina, the woman I truly love," I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply smiled, reached for the divorce papers, and signed them with the same hand that had built his empire from nothing. He thought he was walking away with love. He had no idea he was walking away from everything he owned. Because love may blind men, but betrayal, it awakens women. The first time I met Ethan, he wasn't the powerful CEO the world knows today. He was a dreamer, living in a small rented apartment with a second-hand desk, a flickering bulb, and a mind full of impossible plans. I was the practical one, fresh out of university, cautious yet ambitious. We met at a networking event that neither of us could afford to attend, and I still remember the way he looked at me as if I was already part of his story. "You and I," he said that night, "we're going to change everything." And foolishly, I believed him. Back then, our love was built on struggle and shared hunger. We ate instant noodles while planning business models on napkins. When we couldn't afford coffee, we walked through the city, talking about the future like it was something we could build with our bare hands. Ethan was full of energy, ideas, and recklessness, while I was his anchor, the one who turned his chaos into direction. Together, we built a company that started with one client and a promise, E&S Holdings, named after both of us, Ethan and Sophia. The early years were brutal. We worked from dawn until exhaustion blurred the days together. But we made it. Slowly, success began to come. Our first big client brought in just enough to upgrade our office. Then came the investors, the hotels, the fashion collaborations. With every new deal, Ethan became more confident, more admired. He began to wear designer suits instead of thrifted ones, his laughter louder, his presence heavier. People started to look at him the way I used to, like he was unstoppable. And for a long time, I was proud of him. We were partners in every sense. But somewhere between the boardrooms and banquets, something shifted. The man who once held my hand during sleepless nights now barely noticed when I left the room. I became the quiet force behind his spotlight, the strategist no one mentioned, the silent strength behind his speeches. Every award he accepted, he'd smile at the cameras and say, "None of this would be possible without my wife." Yet when the applause faded, he'd go days without asking how I was. Then Sabrina arrived. She came into our lives like perfume, soft, sweet, but suffocating. She was young, lively, and charming, hired as the company's PR director. Everyone loved her instantly, especially Ethan. She was everything I wasn't anymore. Carefree, bold, flirtatious. The first time I saw them together at a meeting, I noticed the way her laughter lingered a second too long after his jokes. The way his eyes followed her movements, pretending not to. It wasn't obvious at first, but it was there, the beginning of betrayal disguised as connection. I wanted to confront him, but I didn't. Instead, I watched. I watched how she started sitting beside him at events, how his late nights, at the office, became more frequent, and how her lipstick shade began to appear faintly on his coffee mugs. I started sleeping alone more often, hearing his excuses echo through the walls like ghosts of our love. One evening, I went to the office unannounced. I had forgotten a presentation file and thought I could catch him before he left. When I entered his office, I froze. Through the glass wall, I saw them, Ethan and Sabrina, too close, his hand tracing her cheek. It was quick, almost delicate, but it was enough. Enough to shatter years of love, sacrifice, and partnership in a single heartbeat. I walked away quietly, my heels clicking against the marble floor. My heart didn't race. My throat didn't close. There were no tears, just a deep, consuming calm. Because in that moment, I realized something that changed everything. I was no longer a wife. I was a weapon he had forged himself. When Ethan came home that night, smelling of champagne and guilt, I was sitting by the fireplace with a stack of financial documents. He looked surprised to see me awake. "Sophia, we need to talk," he began, avoiding my eyes. "About what?" I asked, though I already knew. He sighed, sitting down across from me. "About us. Things, they're different now. I feel like we've grown apart." I stayed silent, watching him fumble with his words. Then came the confession, so soft and rehearsed that it almost sounded gentle. "I've fallen in love with someone else," he said. "Her name is Sabrina." The words hung in the air like smoke. I remember the taste of betrayal, bitter and metallic. But I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just looked at him, the man who once promised me the world, and felt nothing but cold clarity. I see, I said finally, closing the file in front of me. Then I suppose you want a divorce. He looked almost relieved. Yes, I think it's the right thing for both of us. I smiled faintly, nodding. You're right, Ethan, it is. He had no idea that by the time he packed his bags, I had already begun rewriting the script of his downfall. Every company document, every contract, every share, he had signed them over the years without truly reading them, trusting me blindly. And he should have, once. But now, that trust was the blade he handed me himself. While he spent his nights with Sabrina, I spent mine revising legal agreements, transferring ownerships, and sealing power where he'd never think to look. I traced the veins of our empire, understanding exactly where his wealth, pride, and reputation pulsed the strongest, and how to cut them cleanly when the time came. I didn't do it for revenge. Not yet. I did it for peace. For the woman who had once dreamed beside a man who promised eternity but delivered humiliation. The night before the court hearing, I sat alone in our bedroom, half empty now, and looked at the divorce papers. My hand hovered over the signature line. Somewhere in the distance, laughter drifted from Ethan's phone. He was probably with her. I took a deep breath, steady and calm. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed love was about building together, sacrificing together. That girl had died the moment he chose Sabrina. And in her place stood someone new. Someone who knew her worth. Someone who wouldn't just walk away quietly. When the morning sun rose through the curtains, I smiled. The world would soon know what Ethan Crawford had lost, not just a wife, but the foundation of his empire. And as I slipped into my white suit for court, I whispered to my reflection, "You built his world, Sophia. Now show him what happens when you stop holding it up." When I signed the divorce papers, Ethan thought he was free. Free to love, free to start over, free to live his fantasy with Sabrina. He didn't realize that with the stroke of my pen, he had just handed me the keys to everything he had ever owned. While he was celebrating his new beginning, I was quietly ending his empire, piece by piece, signature by signature. And the best part, he never saw it coming. The courtroom that morning was a stage, and Ethan played his role perfectly. He arrived in a sharp gray suit, confident and charming as always. Sabrina sat behind him, her manicured fingers wrapped around his arm like she already belonged in my place. The photographers outside called their names as if this was a royal ceremony, not the burial of a marriage. I walked in silently, in a white dress, not because I wanted to look pure, but because white was the color of power when worn by the unbroken. Ethan turned to me with a rehearsed expression of regret. "Sophia," he said softly, "let's make this easy. We both deserve to be happy." I met his gaze without a tremor. "Easy?" I asked, a small smile curving on my lips. "Don't worry, Ethan. It will be." The judge began reading through the documents. Ethan had already gone through the motions with his lawyer. He was certain everything had been arranged in his favor. He would keep the house, the cars, and a portion of the company, while I'd walk away with enough to live comfortably. That was the deal he'd pushed for. That was the deal he thought I'd accepted. When the moment came to sign, Ethan reached for the pen first. His hand didn't shake. Mine didn't either. I signed the papers, placed the pen down, and whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "Congratulations, Ethan. You finally got what you wanted." He smiled faintly. "You're doing the right thing." As he said it, I almost laughed. Because while the courtroom saw a divorce, I saw the execution of a plan that had been in motion for months. The moment the final signature was filed, my legal team, quietly working behind the scenes, activated a series of ownership transfers. Shares, patents, real estate titles, everything that Ethan believed he owned was, in truth, under shell companies I controlled. I had made sure of it long before Sabrina entered the picture. By the time he and his new lover left the courthouse, his world had already begun to crumble. He just didn't know it yet. 3 days later, the first shock hit. The banks froze several of his accounts. "System error," they told him. Then, investors began calling, demanding explanations for sudden leadership changes. His assistant resigned without warning. And within a week, Ethan's name was quietly removed from E&S Holdings' executive registry. He called me then, for the first time since the divorce. His voice was laced with disbelief. "Sophia, what's happening? My accounts, my assets, they're gone." Someone's tampering with everything. I let him speak, calm and patient, before saying, not someone, Ethan. Me. There was a pause, then silence, heavy and stunned. You, he finally whispered. You did this. Yes, I said. Every document you ever signed, every deal you ever made, I was there. You thought I was just your wife. But I was the mind behind your empire. You just never noticed. He tried to yell, to threaten, but his words collapsed into broken anger. You ruined me, he said. I exhaled softly. No, Ethan, you ruined yourself. I just stopped saving you. The story spread faster than I expected. Business networks couldn't stop talking about the brilliant but ruthless divorce that ended one of the most powerful empires in the city. Articles praised my strategic brilliance, calling it the most calculated move in corporate history. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't need to. Sabrina disappeared within days. She wasn't built for failure, and Ethan's fall was too steep to catch. One morning, I saw his photo on a tabloid, his once proud face hollow, his smile gone. He was living in a rented apartment now, stripped of the wealth he had flaunted like armor. It should have felt like revenge. But it didn't. It felt like closure. A few weeks later, he came to see me. My office, our old one, was now entirely under my name. The building gleamed, my name engraved where his once stood. When he entered, he looked like a shadow of the man I'd known. Sophia, he said quietly, why? Why didn't you just take the money and leave? I looked at him, my expression calm. Because, Ethan, this was never about money. It was about respect. You took my silence for weakness. You mistook my loyalty for dependence. You thought I needed you to survive, but you forgot that I built everything you had. He stared at me, eyes tired, filled with something that looked like regret. I loved you once, he said. I smiled sadly. No, Ethan, you loved what I did for you. There's a difference. He lowered his gaze, realizing there was nothing left to say. As he turned to leave, I said softly, do you know what the most painful part is? It's not losing you. It's realizing I gave everything to a man who thought my worth ended where his ego began. He didn't respond. He just walked out of my life the same way he had once walked into it, with ambition and pride, but this time, stripped of power. After he left, I stood by the window of my office and looked at the skyline. It was beautiful, vast, and mine. For the first time, I felt peace, not the kind that comes from revenge, but the kind that blooms when you finally reclaim yourself. The city lights shimmered below, and I could almost see my reflection in them, strong, calm, untouchable. Later that night, I hosted a charity gala under the new name of my company, Sophia Holdings. As I stood on stage, cameras flashing, I spoke the words I had waited years to say. They say behind every successful man is a strong woman, I said with a small smile. But I learned something different. Sometimes, behind every successful man is a woman who built the ladder, and when she steps away, the whole tower collapses. The audience rose in applause, but I wasn't looking for approval. I was looking for freedom, and I finally had it. When I left the gala, the night air was cool against my skin. I walked alone, but not lonely. Because I wasn't walking away anymore. I was walking forward. When someone betrays you, don't rush to destroy them. Just step back, rebuild yourself, and let time reveal what they lost when they lost you. The greatest revenge isn't taking their world apart, it's showing them that you never needed it to begin with. Because power isn't in the empire you build together, it's in the strength you find when you stand alone. And sometimes, the woman they underestimated becomes the lesson they'll never forget.